Hey guys, it's Critical Fish, and today we're taking the time to discuss AI in video game development and publishing. The topic of AI is a very vast and expanding topic, so I've taken the time to kind of step back and wait for a few really interesting news stories to develop to then analyze and discuss in this video. I'll start by saying that I think AI in video game development will ultimately be a net positive, but for right now, it's in the testing phases. Companies are really trying to figure out what's right and what's wrong, and I think it's pretty messy right now. In this video, I want to touch on 4 key areas that are impacted by AI, including game development, which genre a game takes place in, the available roles at a company, and finally the players and how they are impacted. If you're interested in my future coverage of video game industry news and curated collection showcases, as well as my thoughts and opinions on all things games, feel free to subscribe to the channel and like this video. It really helps out. I also want to say that AI is kind of a new topic for me as well, so I'm doing my best to cover the most accurate stories that I've found. So the first area that I see being affected the most would be game development. That includes production efficiency, the tools that developers have at their disposal, as well as the ethical and creative decisions that people at the studio have to make in order for the games to get made. The best case scenario for AI in game development is that the time it takes to develop a game gets shortened down. Right now, in the AAA world of video games, it takes upwards of 5 to 7 years to produce one single game, and there's no guarantee that it even becomes a success upon its release. In theory, if AI were to be implemented into game development itself, whether that be on developer teams, graphic design, marketing, production, etc., it would reduce the amount of time it would take to create assets, finalize scripts, or even have the game QA tested. In theory, this leads to faster and cheaper development, especially for smaller studios that want to push out their games with smaller teams. There's also the new availability of more tools for developers to work with while creating their games. If you're an indie studio or a smaller AA studio, there's the potential for faster prototyping and a higher baseline of quality because you have more to work with. When it comes to tools, indies will benefit the most in comparison to AAA studios who have a lot more funding to get whatever they need. I also feel the fact that there will be a lot more ethical and creative tension and decisions to make during the game development process. And that's going to come from a lot of different angles. You're going to get a lot of pushback from voice actors, artists, and game developers who want to do their work without being replaced with AI. So there's going to be big discussions within how teams are structured at studios. The decision to use AI in certain ways is going to be a case-by-case scenario with every single game development studio on the planet. So some will outright refuse to use it while others will require it. Part of the discussion right now is the concerns about being replaced, having ownership over your own work, and whether or not the products you produce will be authentic. This will create divided adoption across the games industry, and we are currently seeing the first couple years of how that's playing out right now. For instance, in a recent job listing from Ubisoft, it appears that the company is now requiring the usage of Claude AI and ChatGPT to even be considered during the hiring process, regardless of the type of role that you have. This kind of shows that Ubisoft, on its own, is looking for people to be familiar with this technology and understand it no matter what kind of role they're being placed into. Ubisoft is a AAA game developer and publisher that recently got acquired by a private equity company, so I'm not really surprised they're in this safe zone for innovation, and they're kind of pushing the fact that they need AI in their workflows. On the other hand, a smaller team like S-Game Studios, who's currently developing Phantom Blade Zero, recently stated on their Twitter that they are super proud to not be implementing any form of AI in their upcoming release. They're quoted by saying, "We firmly believe that human artistry is not merely a means for creating value, it is the value itself," which is a pretty bold statement and shows that developers really care and are extremely intentional with the work that they are putting into their games. And on a personal note, if I were to pick and play one of these games from one of these developers, I would go with the one from S-Game almost every single time. It's not that I don't care for the innovation of AI in these game development systems. It's more about the intentionality and respect that game developers and publishers have for the product. The next area of impact that AI has is in the genre of game. When a game developer goes to make a game, now that they have access to AI systems, what type of game are they going to build? I think going forward, AI has now opened up the possibilities for what kind of games we're going to be able to make. And I think all types of developers, whether they are AAA or indie, are looking at those options as well. While not exactly tied to AI, it makes me think of when Kojima announced that OD, a new Microsoft exclusive game, would be directly tied to the innovation that Microsoft has with its Azure cloud servers. It tells me that people like Kojima are starting to think outside the box with how technology advances. The reality is that we still have not seen much footage of this game, so a lot of these ideas and new projects are still kind of in rough prototype phases, but I like where developers' heads are at. There's also the opposite side of that discussion where, the broad usage and exposure of AI to a lot of independent game developers might allow a slip in quality to come with that. Like more garbage games could be pushed out onto Steam easily or the app stores that are available. And that's not too great. You can say AI slop. I've seen that term get tossed around quite a bit. But, the dedicated, thoughtful developers that respect the art form are going to get their hands on these tools and be able to make better projects than they could ever imagine. I'm assuming, indie games could start to develop AA games or even AAA quality games with these new tools and resources. Even the new CEO of Xbox, Asha Sharna, said that there's no room for AI slop in games. She was quoted with saying, "As monetization and AI evolve and influence the future, we will not chase short-term efficiency or flood our ecosystem with soulless AI slop." And hearing that from someone that has worked with AI at a very high level previously gives me some hope and understanding that some of the executives, at least at Xbox and Microsoft, are starting to understand what players want. This might just be PR, but I genuinely do think that they understand that having this mindset is a good thing. Another area that AI has been affecting and will continue to impact are roles available at certain game studios and publishers. As you've seen, there's going to be a rapid decline in repetitive roles for jobs that are similar to junior artists, basic writing roles, or even QA. These roles are getting swapped out with automated systems that can do that type of work for a lot cheaper and a lot more effectively than some people could. And again, this is an evolving process, so you're going to see a lot of change and instability with these decisions. Even the Take-Two CEO has said in the past that AI will be a net positive for people at some point and that it will actually increase employment. But we're starting to find out that some of the reality is that AI doesn't belong in every aspect of game development and might actually hinder the teams that are working on these games. Especially with something like Grand Theft Auto 6, building a game at that scale, I'm not sure how effective AI would be a hindrance or a help in game development for a game like that. I'm sure the developers there are working extremely hard and would appreciate extra help from AI assistants and stuff like that, but you're also creating a work of art that's going to be looked at for generations. So I'm not really sure if you want some of that work to be artificially created. Regardless of if AI is implemented into your studio or not, I still think you're going to need a lot of creators and visionaries for the game that you're building. I think that creative direction, game design, and strategic decision making are going to be more important than ever, especially if you're working with small and extremely large game teams. You're always going to have to solve what to build and then how to build it. So if you don't have an interesting game concept or good ideas, you're kind of in a rough spot for that. Ultimately, this promotes the idea that people need to be very involved with what type of game you're building and how you're going to build it, regardless of if AI is going to be implemented into the development process or not. Lastly, AI will impact players. Once a game has been strung together by a miracle with talented developers and funding and, being housed at a certain game studio, you're going to have players that are impacted by the final product. As this technology evolves, you're actually going to see a major increase in the amount of games that are produced and published every day going forward. This might actually be a negative thing for players because having major choice paralysis will actually impact which games are seen in storefronts or which games get played or promoted. For game studios to succeed going forward, you need a really strong marketing campaign or trust from the players to play your game as soon as it launches. This will ultimately promote the idea of branding, community, and visibility for games rather than how good your product is upon release. If there's more games in the market, you need to be unique and stand out to your players. The marketing will become almost as important as the game itself, regardless of the quality of the game. As someone who studied marketing and sales myself during my time at college, this actually is kind of a bad thing in my eyes, but it does pose for an interesting challenge to solve for game developers and publishers going forward. Also, from a player's perspective, we're starting to see how AI being utilized in game development is starting to impact players' perceptions of the games themselves. A game called Replaced just released after multiple delays and a lot of hiccups during its development. And this game is great from what I've heard, but it's gotten immediate backlash because IGN miscorrectly labeled the game as using AI during its development, when in reality, the game's world and setting had AI baked into the storytelling. This led to a lot of people crashing out online about AI being used in the game's development, when in reality, IGN was promoting a false message. And this could have directly affected game sales. And that is not a good thing, but we're starting to see how players react to these situations. Another interesting story that ties into a recent release is regarding Pragmata. And there was an interview with the developers where they kind of expressed wow, we would have never expected AI to be this advanced in 2026 leading up to our game's release. We should have considered more opportunities to expand on that in the game's story. It's not actually clear if the developers used AI for the game's development, but it's just a funny story that kind of shows the similarities between Replaced and Pragmata. Lastly, for players, when they're actually sitting down and playing the games, if AI is utilized in new and upcoming games, there might be opportunities for more unique experiences. Now, I'm going to put quotes around the word unique because it might be uniquely designed or it might be uniquely generated by AI. Think of games that you've played where you've had unique experiences that your friends might not have experienced at the time that they were playing it as well. But now think of opportunities where games are generating new possibilities in real time that are actually brand new compared to what other players have experienced. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not, but I definitely see that happening with more games over time. So ultimately, AI is here to stay, and it's going to change what games get made, who gets hired to build the games, and what players see and value out of your games. I plan to make more videos talking about AI and how it's impacting video game studios because it is an evolving topic, and I've waited to see more stories pop out of places like AAA game development studios like Rockstar or Ubisoft, as well as see how it's impacted smaller studios with upwards of 10 people working at a studio. I think it's a really interesting topic, and again, I ultimately think it will be a positive for game developers long term, but right now we're in the shaky stages of it, so it's just interesting to see how all of it's playing out. If you're interested in more of my content, again, feel free to subscribe. Let me know what your thoughts on AI in the comments below, and have a great day.